Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the Excel cast. Today, I have a very interesting guest. His name is Jeff Glauser. Am I saying that right?
Glauser.
Glosser? Jeff
Close enough.
Glosser. Yeah. Jeff, nice to have you here today. If you want to just start by telling us a little bit about yourself and, how you got to where you are.
How I got to where I am. That would be a good title for a book if I decide to create one, because it's certainly been a long, strange trip. But first and foremost, thank you so much for having me, Joe. Happy to share my story, and if I can make an impact and with anyone out there by sharing it, then I find that extremely rewarding.
Absolutely.
So how I got to where I am. Tell you a little bit about me. Grew up in South Jersey, so right outside of Philadelphia, and always a big sports guy. So that was the kind of the dream as a kid. By the time I got to high school, I realized I was a bit too short, too slow, got winded a little too easily, and it probably wasn't in the cards, genetically speaking, for me to be a professional athlete. So I that was my first pivot, I guess you could say, out of a handful of those over the course of my life. And around that same time, I discovered I had a knack for writing. So I figured that the next best thing, if I couldn't play sports, would be to write about them. So that was the phase two of the dream for my career, and I pursued it, and it was going in that direction for quite a while. Became well, ultimately the sports editor and then the editor in chief of my college newspaper. So I wound up going to Jacksonville University in Florida for my undergrad. Got a chance to really kind of be in my element. So I got a chance to cover the Jaguars while I was in school. So their first year as an NFL team was my first year at Jacksonville University. So we kind of grew up together in a way. And my first real big time experience, I guess you could say, is we were able to secure press passes for the Jags games. And I went to their first ever home Monday night game. And I think this was 96 or 97 at this point. So we're going back a bit. And I remember just being on the field, and it was a close game. And here I am, this little snot-nosed 19-year-old kid, with my credentials on, a little notepad in one hand, and a little tape recorder in the other. I don't know if you're old enough to remember tape recorders, but that's what I used, way before the iPhones.
Yeah.
And just waiting for some security guy to put his hand on my shoulder saying, "Hey, kid, you don't belong here. Get out." Never happened. But I remember it came down to the final kick, final play of the game, and the Jags were up by one, and the Steelers had a chance to put it away with no time left with a chip shot field goal. It got blocked and returned for a touchdown. And I just remember everyone, I'm like literally several feet away from the bench, and everyone just comes rushing off the bench and storming the field. And here I am just wondering, okay, what do I do next?
Yeah.
And I remember just walking out, just kind of tailing, the rest of the team, just wondering, who I might encounter. And I remember coming back the other direction was Jimmy Smith, and at the time he was the star receiver of the Jags and one of the best receivers in the league at that point. And he had a great game, I remember too. And I'm walking to him, he's walking toward me, and I figured, well, this is my chance. So my first ever official interview, and I use air quotes, official
Mm.
interview was me walking up to Jimmy as he's approaching me and saying something along these lines. And I know it was a bit of a blur, but Jimmy, how does it feel to finally get the respect you deserve on national TV? And I figured that was a good enough, question. I figured that was serviceable.
Yeah.
And his response was something along the lines of, "Yeah, oh yeah, it feels good, man. This is the NFL," and not much to it. But I just remember the next day going back to school and continuously replaying that to all my friends, going, "That was Jimmy Smith," and just rewinding. Yeah, yeah, man, it feels good. It's the NFL, and just keep going. And that's when I really felt the itch, and really knew that this is something that felt purposeful, that I was passionate about, and that I wanted to lean into. So that was affirmation, if you will. So I continued along that route. Looking back in hindsight, I had a bit of chase the shiny object syndrome. So
Mm.
whenever I saw an opportunity, I guess it was a little FOMO, you can say, I wanted to pursue it. So when I graduated, and I had an internship at the local newspaper at that point, but they weren't hiring. And after maybe a week or two of looking and not finding that cushy sports reporter gig, I had another opportunity that fell in my lap to work as a leadership consultant for my fraternity, for their headquarters in Indianapolis. And I figured, well, I love to travel, and it seems like an opportunity, and I loved my experience being in my fraternity. So I figured, what the heck? It was a 2-year commitment. I got the chance to travel all over the country, visit people from all different walks of life, and also make an impact, which is something that I always embraced. And it was a wonderful experience. So then after those 2 years, then it was time for the next transition. And, of course, get back on track, right? Well, again, after maybe a week or two of looking for that sports reporter gig and not finding what I was looking for just yet, another opportunity fell in my lap where, hey, we'll pay for you to go to grad school at the University of Miami if you help with the student life office. So I was a graduate advisor, student life, and they took care of my first year. I had no desire to go back to grad school until I visited about 100 different schools in those 2-year span and grew wistful of the experience and figured, okay, there was a lot I missed out on. There was a lot I still could experience. So I went back. I didn't go back for journalism, though, because I felt that was redundant, unless I was going to be a professor, which, by the way, teaser alert, I wound up becoming a professor. But at that time, I didn't think that was going to happen. So another thing that I've always been passionate about were TV and movies. So I was a latchkey kid. I was glued to the TV growing up. I, was always, interested in the classics and really kind of how they put everything together. So I went to film school and became a screenwriting major. Enjoyed the experience, did that for 2 years, felt a little lost in my element as far as being there. So I was kind of alone without being alone. But when everyone made that mass exodus out to Hollywood after graduation, I guess I chickened out a little bit and laid low. And that's when I began the journalism career. So first part-time while I was working with a recruiting firm, I was freelancing for the Associated Press. Again, back in my element, in the locker room, on the field, in the press conference room, and really feeling good about that. Ultimately for an editor at that local publication in South Florida. And then I decided to move back up north. I guess I wouldn't say homesick, but I felt like I needed a connection I wasn't getting there. So that's when I wound up ultimately getting a job, which I felt was about 20 feet away from the dream job, which was sports editor for my hometown newspaper. I was the Metro editor. However, very soon after that, this was around the time when print started giving way to digital, I was laid off. So as exciting as it was to finally embark upon this career path that I had envisioned for myself, it was just stripped away from me. Now, looking back, it turned out I think I was the 9th section editor there in 11 years. So I guess the writing should have been on the wall, but it was certainly still a gut punch for me. So from there, that's when I became an adjunct professor. I went back to my freelancing roots, worked with Bleacher Report for several years, if you're familiar with that, as a featured columnist, enjoyed that. It was more of a vanity ad, though, because that was, again, timing is everything. That was prior to them handsomely compensating their reporters. So it was a looks good on paper, but it was also around the time that I started building a family and, being a part-time professor, a part-time freelancer wasn't necessarily cutting it. So almost by necessity, I pivoted into sales and marketing at that point and soon discovered I had a knack for it. Ultimately, I landed in the reputation management and digital marketing space, which seemed like the perfect combination of this newfound sales aptitude and my passion for the media. So wound up spending the better part of the next 10 years within that industry, working with a few different startups, all of them eerily similar, where they had these eccentric owners. They showed very well. They brought on a lot of high profile clients and they recruited a lot of talented people, but they struggled to deliver on a consistent basis. In fact, every time that Google would update its algorithm, it seems like any of the results that we would provide for them would just fall off the pages and we go scrambling to try to salvage the relationship with the client, as opposed to actually doing it right the first time. So at this point, I was running a sales team and I was kind of caught in limbo, trying to appease ownership and trying to talk my team off the ledge, telling them, hey, pay no attention to the elephant in the room, just keep your head down and grind. And it wore on me. and to the point where I really kind of grew disenfranchised of the experience, especially being a man of integrity and wanting to do right by the client at all times. And it grew to the point where I kind of forced my way out of another one of those toxic situations, and then found myself really essentially at a crossroads, and not just necessarily with my career, but with my life too. So, you know how a lot of people talk about how 2020 is like the year from hell for some obvious reasons.
Yeah.
Well, 2019 was mine. So it was
Mm.
kind of like a blessing in disguise, because I was able to prepare for the chaos externally that lied ahead, because of everything that was happening within my own world a year prior. So in addition to, you know, 2 layoffs within a year, I also had a ridiculous legal issue. I began hemorrhaging money. It was affecting my health. My marriage was the beginning of the end with that. That started crumbling. So it really was the perfect storm, to the point where I woke up on my birthday that year to a panic attack. And if that's not a wake up call, literally, then I don't know what is. So it really did force me to take a step back, because, well, at this point, I had 2 small kids that were counting on me to get my act together. And I needed to show up, and I needed to make sure that I was the best version of myself, if not for me, at least for my children. But the only way I can do that is to look inward first. So, what I first did before anything else was come up with a list of all the things that I knew were important to do on a day to day basis, that if I were to implement it, it would, if not ensure that I would progress, at least ensure that I would continue, I would stop regressing.
Yeah.
Right. So initially, I came up with about 24 different things that I felt were essential, and I ranked it from 0 to 5 as far as how well I did. In other words, Joe, I completely overcomplicated the damn thing.
Yeah.
But through a series of trial and error and fits and spurts over the course of time, I was able to whittle that down to 10 things. And instead of ranking it, it was either I did it or I didn't do it. And it didn't matter how much of it I did. It didn't even matter how well I did. It just mattered that I got it done, and I was able to check it off the list and keep that chain going. And that was the game changer for me. That was really kind of the pivotal point for me, where I was able to incorporate this much needed structure in my life at a time when nothing seemed to be structured. So, and I'll tell you, to this day, I still have that spreadsheet that I refer to every single day. And there's enough of a sample size now where if I go 10 for 10, if I'm not guaranteed to have a good day, I'm at least guaranteed not to have a bad one. So there's that there too. So once I was able to get that part in place, and get the internal stuff really taken care of, the next step, of course, was to get my career back on track. So first, I went back to my roots as a freelancer, and did some consulting, sales and marketing consulting, did publication placement. Again, you know, enjoyed it, but it wasn't necessarily financially stable for me. So I decided that I needed to build a brand out of that. I needed to build a business that really accentuated these things that I was doing for other people that were providing value in some way, shape, or form. But in order to do that, especially since I was kind of all over the place with the types of services I was providing, I needed to figure out a common through line. So I took inventory of the different hats that I had worn. And what immediately occurred to me was the common through line of storytelling. So whether it be as a journalist, whether it be as a screenwriter, whether it be as a salesperson and a manager or a teacher, if I didn't have a compelling story that resonated with my audience, it really didn't matter what else I brought to the table. It was likely going to fall upon deaf ears. So I leaned into that. I put that out there on more than a couple occasions. By doing so, it was recommended that I check out Donald Miller's works and building a story brand. And wasn't familiar with him at that point. But as soon as I read the book, it felt very serendipitous, because he uses the running analogy of the hero's journey. And that was essentially screenwriting 101 for me. I had taught that, I had learned that in grad school, but I had never equated it to the brand building side. So that's what was eye-opening for me, is that each of those beats, and this is The Hero's Journey, is by Joseph A. Campbell, and it's essentially the framework that 99% of all screenplays, even today, are based upon, even though this was something that he had created, you know, over a half century ago. So I always thought of it as storytelling 101. You start with a character. The character has an aspirational identity, something they want to achieve, but something gets in their way, and it's causing them to lose sleep or affect their lives in some way, shape, or form. Then you insert the wise guide that's that it displays empathy, but also shares that they're qualified to take them on this journey. They give them a simple plan and yada yada yada, happily ever after. So that made sense to me on the story side, but it was completely revelatory how seamlessly each of those beats translated to the business side of things, to the brand side of things. You start with a character, the character being the client. The client has an aspirational identity. There's something that the client wants to become, wants to be known as, but something's getting in the way and it's causing them, real pain. And then you insert the guide being you as the provider of whatever service or product that you're offering. You display empathy. Hey, I know how you feel. I've been there myself. You also display authority. Hey, this is a proven plan that I've been able to use for myself and for X amount of other, clients that I've worked for. And I'd love to give you this same plan and then help you along the way. And then yada, 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 happily ever after. So wound up starting my business called Brandscribed about a year and a half ago, where it really was a labor of love. It was me essentially scratching my own itches that I'd had, especially at those crossroads moments of my life where I was struggling to figure out how to change the narrative. And I was really reaching out for, whatever resources, whatever guidance, whatever mentorship that I could find. And an opportunity now for me to pay it forward to other clients. So I was essentially targeting higher profile people who have had a level of success in their career like I had, but we're now pivoting to something else. So I started out with a masterclass that to this day I'm extremely proud of. It was a months long endeavor of me aggregating all this content that I had consumed, curating it. I even brought in 3 other co-facilitators that were highly pedigreed in their own right that filled in the gaps that I might have had. And everything was great. There was this 80 plus page companion workbook, and we promoted it. And then we started the live class. And the good news is that each of those people that wound up attending the class wound up becoming a client in some way, shape, or form, and also were absolutely thrilled by the experience. The bad news is that there were 2 people that attended. So usually not a good ratio when you have less students than you do facilitators. So that was an issue for me. And part of it, looking back, was that I was casting too wide of a net. The messaging wasn't clear. And so at that point, I decided to actually lean in to more of the story brand principles and bite the bullet and become a certified guide. So they have a high ticket certification program. There's over 600 of them, throughout the world right now. And it was an opportunity for me to eat my own cooking a little bit more. So I did that in December, and I'm absolutely, grateful that I did, because not only was I able to tap into a community of other like-minded people that were there to serve as a safety net of some sort, but also allow me to really practice what I preach and lean into that. And shortly thereafter, I was able to bring on a client that I felt was ideal for me, and also allowed me to come full circle. It was a former NFL athlete that was transitioning post-retirement into an entrepreneurial role, but was struggling to get his message out. So I took him under my wing, helped him out. Within the first month, I was able to get him a guest spot on 2 different podcasts. I was able to get him a meeting with an Emmy award-winning Hollywood producer who remains interested in doing a reality show around his own journey. And also, of course, crafting the messaging that was going to resonate with his audience. And I'll tell you, Joe, it was an extremely gratifying experience for me to take what I had learned and what had worked for me, and then to share it with somebody who was successful in their own right, but now was trying to write that next act, in the script of their lives. And that's kind of where I'm at today at this point, is figuring out how I can continue to leverage those experiences, continue to help other people like him and like others that, are in their own transitions in life, change the narrative of what they were seen as to what they want to be seen as, and to be seen as a respected figure in that field based on their own stories as well.
Yeah, absolutely, Jeff. And to your point earlier, that could definitely be a book. You were a very, very active member in everything that you did. And one of my main questions to you is, I've seen people who aren't as active kind of fall into that rut of not improving. Do you feel like it was a not improving thing, or do you feel like because you were so involved in various things that it kind of the risk factor of a lot of stuff that you were involved in kind of got to you? If that,
I think certainly a little of both, but definitely much more of the latter.
yeah.
I felt like there was a lot of paralysis by analysis,
Mm,
especially after having some of these hiccups within my career, these setbacks. And then, you know, clearly it caused a lot of doubt internally as far as, well, where do I go from here? What do I do next? Can I do it? So, yeah, there was definitely a crisis of confidence that ensued as as I was hitting some of these roadblocks and as these obstacles were getting in my way. Yeah, I mean, I don't think it was through inaction. I don't
mm,
think I just kind of threw the towel and said, well, forget it. I just didn't know where to put the towel, I guess you could say.
yeah, yeah.
I didn't know what direction to head in because there was always this level of hesitation where, if I take too much of a leap, is it going to set me back so much that it wasn't even worth it? So having clarity is going to give you confidence first and foremost.
Yep.
If you're clear about what you want to do, then, naturally you're going to feel more confident about that decision. And that's what I needed beyond all else is just kind of figuring out how to unmuddy the waters. And really it started with that, kind of that inventory of my roles. When I did that and realized, okay, there needs to be two things that hit the mark here. I got to check off two boxes before anything else. Something that makes me feel purposeful and something that I'm passionate about. If you don't have a purpose driven passion, nothing else really matters because you're no matter how quote unquote successful you might be on paper, how much money you make, the status that you earn, if you're not purpose driven about it, if you're not passionate about it, you're just going through the motions. And going through the motions is really no way to live life.
Yeah. I feel like too, you need to find purpose within what you're doing. Like you said, I feel like sometimes people find a purpose like, oh, I'm going to work because I have a family. And while your family, can be a reason that you bite the bullet with certain jobs or having to make money, I feel like really trying to find a purpose within the job and then find, when you're taking care of your family and you're with your family, your purpose is to be with your family and you're not working because of your family. You know what I mean? Like,
Absolutely.
yeah,
Mhm.
because then you enjoy work more and it's not so much of a, um, how you say, like you're doing it just for the money, just to support your family. But I
Mhm.
do think that your family is a motivation to find that purpose.
Oh, no, without a
And
doubt.
yeah,
Like I said, at that, crisis moment that I had, the first thing that came to my mind is this the version of me that I want my kids to witness?
yeah,
And that was, really a wake up call more than anything else is that I wanted to make sure that I was portraying the type of character that they could be proud of, and that continues to be my motivation and will continue to be my motivation. And it's hard to find that in just a job versus a career,
hmm,
but sometimes by necessity you need to make a means to an end. But like you had indicated, Joe, there's always something that you could extract from an experience.
yes,
I firmly believe now that in life you either win or you learn. There are no losses. There might be setbacks, but there's something that you can gain from that experience that you can parlay into future experiences as well.
yeah, absolutely. And also, just with having kids, how would you want them to live? Would you want them to go after their dreams? And you can't tell them go after your dreams if that's not what you're doing right now. You need to set that example. And I think you're doing a great job of that because
Thank you.
you're taking all your experiences and you're working for yourself and you're doing great things, Jeff.
I appreciate that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, again, it wasn't a quick fix.
Yep.
I'd love to say you always hear, some of these promotions and these marketing gurus out there like, oh, well, take my course and your life's going to change forever, or read this book. And I'll tell you, it's not that there wasn't value in all of this material that I consumed, but I couldn't sit here and tell you that this one book, this one course, this one coaching call was what did it. It was a compilation of all of that, and it was continuing to keep the wheels in motion and continuing to stay focused on the direction that I wanted to go. And I feel like that's where I went off course, is that I lost focus.
Yeah.
So all throughout my childhood, like I said, I wanted to be an athlete. Okay, well, if that wasn't feasibly in the cards, well, then the next thing that I was passionate about was writing about sports. And then life happened because I lost focus. Now, it's not to say that I didn't again gain a lot of great experiences and skills and all of that from those other things, but there's a cause and effect to everything. So because I decided to take that path, inevitably it caused some detours as far as where I ultimately wanted to be. Now, again, looking back, I can certainly pull from that and now leverage it into what I'm doing now. So all's well that ends well. But in the moment, all that frustration was just because I didn't know where to go next. And if I can do anything to help others, it would be to really give them the clarity that they need to know where they want to go, to figure out that intersection between passion and purpose, and then devise a game plan to stay on track with that and not to wander off course and chase whatever the next shiny object is that comes in their way.
Yeah. And one of the things that you mentioned that helps you stay on course is those list of 10 things that you do. I recently have been listening to an audiobook by Ed Millett or Ed Mellett. I don't know how you pronounce his name, but he talks about specifically the section I was listening to this morning. He talks about when you set those habits, it allows your brain to conserve energy because you go on autopilot mode when you're doing those habits. So if you want to share, your experience with those 10 things or what those 10 things are, I would be really
Sure.
interested to hear that.
Yeah, no, and I couldn't agree more with that statement. Where it takes the thought out of the equation, and at least for me, I'd say thinking can often be a doer's worst enemy.
Mhm.
You think and you think and you think and you plan and you plan and you plan, but nothing ever gets done.
Yep.
So this allowed me to just do the thing and not worry about the results, and just worry about the consistency of it, and just commit and take the thought thinking out of the equation. So for me, I wouldn't say that any of them are groundbreaking. I can list them out and you'll be like, oh, well, yeah, of course, do that. Of
Mhm.
course, do that. So, it starts with, waking up at a certain time in the morning. And this can change for everyone depending on, how you start your day and what's there. But there needs to be some sort of morning routine because for much of my life, I was not a morning person. I would say prior to age 40, I probably was up until 6 a.m. more often than I woke up at 6 a.m. That was just me.
Yeah.
But the problem also was rushing into my day. And
Mhm.
if I didn't give myself enough time to just kind of take everything in and work at a leisurely pace, well, however you start the day is usually how you're going to continue it. So if you're starting your day frazzled and stressed and whatever, it's hard to reverse course once you've
Yeah.
begun that way because everything's momentum. It's momentum either positively or negatively. So that was the first thing, is for me to instill the discipline of waking up with enough time where I can get a morning routine in. So once I do that, then I meditate. And again, this was one of those things where in the beginning it was really difficult. Well, how can I just sit for 15 minutes? I'm textbook ADD, and you're asking
Yeah.
me to sit for 15 minutes and not think or just breathe. I can't do that. Well, you know what I can do? I can sit still for 1 minute and just observe my thoughts. Just do
Yep.
that. No other expectations, no judgment, just observe my thoughts. Same thing with exercise. So that comes right after that. All right. Well, talk about imposter syndrome. Growing up, my mom talked about rebranding too. Unfortunately, my father passed away at a young age, and my mom's escapism to cope was exercise. To the point where she became a competitive bodybuilder, and then wound up becoming a licensed personal trainer. This was all after she turned 40 years old, so very inspirational. But meanwhile, we had a full gym in our basement, and we also had about 100 TV channels in the living room. Guess which one was easier? And each time that I would work out with my mom, she would completely kick my ass, and I'd be sore for days, and I still wouldn't gain any muscles. So what was the point? That was my justification at 15 years old.
Mm.
So for me, and that was kind of the mindset that was ingrained within me throughout much of my adult life. It's like, all right, I'm going to go to the gym. It's going to be painful. I'm not going to see results. And, I would string along maybe a few good weeks, and then, something would inevitably occur and I couldn't go. And then another day would come. And then before you know it, I was off track.
Mm.
So for me, well, how can I take all the excuses off the table? Well, I realized that there were two main excuses that would always come up, whether it be for exercise, meditating, or really anything, which was, one, I don't have the time, and two, I don't have the energy. All right, well, what if I do one push-up or one sit-up? Okay, well, do I have the time to do it? We'll certainly have the time to do one stinking push-up. And do I have the energy? Well, if I don't have the energy to do one push-up, I got far more serious issues, and I got to get that taken care of. Yeah. So that's where it started. It's like, do one push-up, okay? And don't judge yourself. Just do it, check it off the list. But you know what happened? Just organically, that bar started to raise. All right, well, I did one push-up. I'm already here. Why don't I do a set of push-ups? All right, well, I'm starting to feel good now. Why don't I do a few sets? And to the point now where if I'm not exercising at least 30 to 40 minutes a day, now I feel like something's off. Like it's reverse course, where it used to be it used to be like this, I have to, now it's a want to. So, yeah. and that has become the case with all of these habits that I've ingrained. So exercising is to get, I'm sorry?
Like almost a need
to.
A
need to, yes. Yeah. I am seriously off. I can feel it physically if I'm not exercising, if I'm not meditating. Journaling is another thing. So obviously being a writer, another point of imposter syndrome, I would go months and months sometimes throughout my adult life not writing, and yet categorizing myself still as a writer, and it didn't feel natural. So what's the best way to get out of that? Well, frickin' write something. All right. And it didn't matter what. I was perfect is the enemy of good. I absolutely love that statement, because so often I was trying to be perfect at the expense of getting anything done. Okay. So what's the point of trying to be perfect if you're not going to even get started? So what if I just wrote a sentence? What if I just wrote whatever was on my mind? I didn't judge it. I didn't evaluate it. I just did a brain dump and allowed that to be. And let me tell you how therapeutic that was. It was amazing. I mean, that's probably getting writing on paper has been the best therapist I've ever had. And I've been to my share. So I would encourage anyone that is at their own impasse in life, that has all these thoughts and concerns and, and questions swirling in their head, to just sit down and just get it out. And it doesn't matter how you get it out. I don't even care if it's grammatically correct. And, the English professor in me is probably telling me, well, why would you say that to the audience right now? But, that's where you start, and they call it a draft for a reason, is you should be breezing through it. And then from there, you can always go back and refine it if you feel it's necessary, but it's at least out of your head, and it's now something tangible that you can now look back on and allow it to serve as a reference. And I did that all throughout that time of transition, in 2019 and 2020. And, 3-4 years later, and it wasn't long ago, I actually looked back and read some of it, and it was so enlightening. It's like, wow, I almost forgot where I was at that point in my life and how far I've come. Because again, you're not going to see that progress in a day, a week, a month, but you give yourself enough space and you go back to it, and it's amazing. It's mind blowing, especially if you stay the course, you do the things that you need to do. So, so that's 4 already, I think I gave you, that are absolutely essential, that I try to get all that done before 9 a.m. And all that technically can be done, in an hour or less, especially when you're first getting started. Others, so networking, I think it's absolutely critical. So thank you for checking that off my list today. Just have it sparking a new conversation with somebody and connecting, because especially working for yourself, it can be very lonesome. It can be very isolating, and no man is an island. And it's so important to have that human connection in some way, shape, or form. So that's big. Another one I call a mitzvah, Jewish term for a good deed. So being altruistic is great because it removes yourself from yourself in a way where, sometimes the ego driven mind is all about, well, how can I help me? And, all these things are going on with me. Well, even for a few minutes, if you can, make it not about you and somebody else, in a weird sort of way, it then becomes about you again because now you feel better about yourself. I
Yeah.
don't know anybody that feels terrible about helping somebody else. It's like, oh, geez, I gotta, I'm gonna make this person's day and it's gonna be so annoying. Nobody says that.
Yeah.
So I try to do something each day, and it can be something really, really small. I mean, from anything from buying a stranger in line a cup of coffee, to wishing a friend a happy birthday,
Mm.
to to serving as a volunteer in some way, shape, or form. But every time I do that, it always makes me feel a little bit better, and then usually I tend to do better things because of that. So that's a big one as well. Yeah, I'm missing two or three, but those are essential. Those are the big things that keep me going every day.
Yeah. One of the main things that I do, well, I've done recently, I was really, really poor at it, is networking, starting a
Hmm.
new conversation with someone. Knowing that everyone's seeking that human connection, and you can always start with a compliment, or you can always start with a, hey, how's your day going? Genuinely caring about how their day's going, and always assuming that they may know something that you don't. They
Hmm.
probably do. Um,
Oh yeah, yeah. And it
Definitely.
might seem hard to believe, but I'm actually an introvert by nature. I know with all this talking, you're like, there's just no way he's an introvert, but it takes a lot of energy when I'm in like a social situation where I can be, especially if I'm kind of the center of attention. I'll enjoy it for a little bit, but then after maybe like an hour or two, it's like, wow, I am drained. Yeah, so it
Yeah.
takes a lot out. So it's not that I don't enjoy it; it's just it takes a lot of energy. So another great thing that I discovered with a lot of these daily habits is that I can chunk them. So, meaning that
Mhm.
I can kind of kill a couple birds with one stone. So, when it comes to networking, for example, I can actually reach out to someone that I haven't spoken with for a while and wish them a happy birthday or say something nice to them. And now I got my good deed and my networking out of the way. And it saves a little energy over the course of time by doing so as well. So, it's a little life hack there for the audience.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. That's a good one. I'm definitely gonna try some of the well, I do wake up at a certain time every day. I do exercise. I don't journal too much. I'll say daily affirmations. That's kind of like my way of journaling, I guess, but it
That's
is
another
nice
one,
to
by the
get
way.
it is. Okay.
That's another
Yeah.
one. Yeah, affirmations are huge. Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
we tend to be our own worst critic, and it's so important to observe what's going on in our head because what we think about, we create, whether we like it or not, good, bad, or ugly. If we continue to have the same thoughts that occur, then that's what we're putting out to the universe, and that's what we're attracting for ourselves. So if we can kind of stop ourselves in our tracks and really reaffirm, how we want to live our lives, what's great about what we do, for the world, then that puts us in the frames, the mind frame that we need to be.
Yeah. What do you think is the best way for someone who doesn't have that, right? Like I kind of developed that through help with my sister. She's a psychology major, so she kind of helped me out with things like that. But someone who's really lost and doesn't know how to get out of that rut of feeling like, they're not good enough or they can't achieve certain things, what's kind of like a first step or a jolt that you would give them to kind of pick them up?
And it might sound ridiculously simple, but I'd say just do it anyway. You know,
Yeah.
I, I guess it's along the lines of fake it till you make it, but you need to practice a repetition. Just like I hated exercising for so long, and I
Mm.
hated meditating, and I just did it anyway. I just did something. So an affirmation: I am valuable. I make an impact on the lives of others. Just write it down, and you might not fully believe it at that given moment, but you keep doing that every single day, and all of a sudden you're basically reprogramming your brain
Yeah.
to start believing that. So do something, even if it feels like you're going through the motions to do it, you're still doing it. You're taking action, and just sitting there and stewing in the negativity. You already know that's not going to work. So why don't you take the road less traveled?
Yeah. Yeah, because the definition of doing something over and over again and expecting a different result is
That's
insanity, correct?
insanity.
So
Yeah.
you feel like you're kind of stuck in a place, do something different. The
Hmm.
same book I was talking about earlier too, he talks about triggers, like changing your triggers. If you feel like your day is mundane and you need something to change, turning the shower on, and then if you go to like wash your hair first, he's like, start washing your body first, or do something like that to like kind of change the way that you view things. Um, because changing those triggers can help you think new thoughts and think new things. So, especially having something in the morning like a daily affirmation, if you don't do that typically, it can, you're observant more throughout your day, and then you'll look for those things more.
That's the key word right there. Observant and awareness is just being
Yeah.
aware. Is so many of us, I would say the majority of the human population does not live in the present moment.
Mm.
And it's kind of sad to think about, but how often throughout the course of the day are we either thinking about what's already happened or what might happen, as
Mm.
opposed to what's happening right there, right in front of us? And we're missing so many opportunities for us to really embrace the moment and to be present and to really build off of that by observing what we're doing, when we're doing it, as opposed to just subconsciously again going through the motions. So yeah, that's huge.
Yeah. Absolutely. I find myself sometimes, especially with having this podcast and needing to be on social media to post and to comment and, uh, respond to people, things like that. I don't like to do that. Like, that's not something like before this, I was not really on anything, uh, deleted apps off my phone. And now that it's almost a requirement for what I do, one of the things that I need to learn how to do more is to like set aside time for it. Like, hey, this hour you're gonna be on your phone, and then that's it. Whereas, I find myself at the gym sometimes looking at my phone, responding to something. I'm like, hey, like I gotta put my phone away. Like I can't do this during
Mhm.
my lift. So
Yeah.
I
But then acknowledge it. I think a lot
yeah,
of times when people see that, they start getting down on themselves again. They're like, oh man, I
yeah,
keep doing this. I keep looking at my phone, as
yes,
opposed to saying, you know what? Hey, I caught myself. All right,
yeah,
that's progress. All right, now I can start instilling the discipline of putting it away and being present and being the moment. So again, the mindset part is key. The response to what you're
yes.
observing is just as important, if not more so, than the actual action itself.
Yeah, I thank you for bringing that up because I do that. I'll be like, "Hey,
We all
this
do.
this workout, you're not going to touch your phone. No social media. If someone texts you and it's urgent, you can answer, but no social media." And then I'll find myself like I'll flick on Instagram and I'm like, it just I go down a little bit. I'm not gonna lie, I go down a little bit. So thank you for sharing that because now I'm gonna
Of
try to
course.
incorporate a different perspective whenever that happens to me.
Yes.
Um,
Yes.
yeah.
Acknowledge the positivity part of it.
Yes. I
Hmm.
like that. That quote that
Hmm.
you just said, acknowledge the positivity. That's
Hmm.
awesome. Um, one of the things that I wanted to bring up as well is you said that your mom started her bodybuilding career after 40, and you made a lot
Yes.
of parallels to, like waking up. You're like, I didn't wake up, early until I was after 40. So do you think that there's a correlation between those two things?
Could be.
Yeah.
Yeah. Maybe, something in the genes, maybe there, we get life started in earnest after we turn 40. Who knows? There could be something to it. But for me, I think, with age comes wisdom as well,
Mm,
especially when you have your share of setbacks that, again, you learn from, if you're lucky.
yeah.
And, that's what happened to me is that, I had to hit my share of brick walls in order for me to finally realize how to get around it.
Yeah. Absolutely. And you're a perfect example of if you don't have it all figured out, it's never too late for you. either. And I think that after 40 is a huge thing, because whenever you find your niche in life and whenever you find what you want to do, you know, the building with time, it doesn't always, you know, require that you be 22 and have it all figured out. And that's something that I've struggled with, and I know a lot of people my age struggle with, is that you need to have everything figured out. You need to have your career set. And while it's good to have a career and it's good to have a job coming out of college, I feel like you need to have a dream beyond that. You need to have a life goal beyond that, because if not, then you just get stuck in this like everyday repetition of, you know, I want to work for myself personally. That is my ultimate goal, to be able to market myself and bring value to the marketplace in, you know, whatever that may be, whether it be podcasting, whether it be business consulting, which is what I do for my day job. Um, you know, whatever that may be, I definitely want to work for myself. And I feel like there's steps before that. And we get caught up on, you know, those steps. So to always have that big vision in mind and that end goal always in mind, no matter the steps that you're taking to them are. So
Hmm.
you're a perfect example of that, to gain experiences and then ultimately live your dream through those experiences.
Absolutely. The end goal is so important, because if you don't know where you're going, how will you know when you get there?
Yeah,
Right? Yeah. So you got to start. You begin with the end in mind, to quote Stephen Covey, and then honor the process in order to get there. Because at the end of the day, it's not how you start; it's how you finish.
yeah,
So whatever wherever you're at in that journey, just continue to get there. Continue to take action, and to have that map laid out as far as what is that passion, what is that purpose, and what are the steps that you need to take in order to get closer to that goal each and every day.
yeah, absolutely. And what are your views on overcomplicating? Because I remember you said earlier that you did 24 things, 0 to 5. Do you feel like you needed to do that in order to be more concise, kind of like funnel it down to a point where you had these 10 things that you do every day?
Perhaps. That's a great question, Joe.
Yeah.
I think in my mind, I think I needed to start with just something and just
Mm,
get all the sloppiness out there and then refine as I go. Because again, it was a matter of I was at least acknowledging that I was taking action. It might
yeah.
have been very sloppy action. It might have been very confusing action, but it was action nonetheless. So there was that. But yeah, ultimately, I knew that I needed to simplify, and that's what that's what's been reinforced even through my experience now as a story brand guide, that if you confuse, you lose. That's
Yeah.
Donald Miller's one of his favorite quotes. If you confuse, you lose.
Yeah.
So simple is usually the right answer. It's almost always the right answer. So if it's complicated, so for example, if somebody goes onto your website and they start scrolling and it's 5 or 10 seconds and they still have no idea what the hell you do,
Yeah.
you're going to lose them. They're going to bounce off that page and you're going to miss out on an opportunity. So you almost have to get to the point where it's silly simple, where it's like almost caveman speak, where, I help people do this and that's it. Okay. And don't overcomplicate it. There's a time and place where you can elaborate. And that's usually when
Yeah.
you're already having the conversation with somebody. You've already converted them into a prospect, and you have this opportunity to now answer any additional questions that they have. But at first, you want to make it as clear as possible exactly what you
Mm,
do, what value you offer, and specifically what pain that you're solving for your audience.
mm. I know our viewers are going to get a lot out of this conversation, but I want you to know I'm getting a lot out of this conversation as well.
Perfect. Mission accomplished then.
Yeah. So you got one person that's getting a lot out of everything that you're saying. I want you to know
That,
that.
I'll
Um,
take it.
yeah. Um, so just to kind of wrap it up, I know you have a quote that you wanted to share. I don't know. Did you share it actually just then, or did you have another one that you wanted to share?
Oh, I don't know. I'm usually full of quotes.
Yeah. Do you have one that
Which
you
quote
want
are
to
you
leave the
referring
audience
to?
with?
What's that?
The Stephen Covey one that you said, or Steve
Oh,
Covey?
the Stephen Covey one I
Yeah.
mentioned was to begin with the end in mind. That was through 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, which
Yeah.
was probably, I think that was the first personal development book that I ever read, and that was back in college.
Okay.
And that was great when it came to habits. And also when it came to simplification. So it's really a matter of, okay, well, this is what you need to do and don't overthink it and just do it. So it tends to reinforce a lot of what we've discussed today.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm usually like, I'm not currently, but I used to be the perfectionist, over planning, paralysis by planning, as you mentioned earlier. And now I'm trying to expand a little bit more and trying to think with an end goal in mind, but just do something that would yield a life like that, step by step, day by day. I used to try to cram years worth of thought and action like into a day, and it really
Mhm.
just kind of stunned me. So I'm trying to be
Well,
more broad with the things that you know, with the
I'll
plan.
give you some advice on that one, Joe, because that sounds a lot like how I was as well.
Yeah,
Um, and it's going to sound counterintuitive, but this is it: embrace failure.
yeah,
And I know that stuff, especially for perfectionists out there. What do you mean? That's like the opposite of perfect. Well, yeah, but it's movement and it's action and it's something that you're going to learn from. And the most successful people in life are the ones that were able to fail repeatedly and learn from that and get back up and iterate and reiterate and do it again until they got it right. And sadly, in our society, failure has become so stigmatized. Well, you can't fail, and if you fail, then you're just going to be branded for life as far as being known as that. It's rubbish. You
yeah,
know, you need to fail because that's the only way that you're going to move forward. You got to fail forward because that's the only way that you're going to get it right. If every time that you come up short with something, you get let down, you're never going to be able to get it right. So we all need to learn how to embrace that, not only to accept it, but embrace it and say, hey, listen, you know what? I'm going to plan to crash and burn today.
yeah,
And maybe I'll do it spectacularly to the point where it's memorable. But you know what? I'm going to do it. I'm going to learn something from it. And then I'm going to get back on the horse and I'm going to improve upon that because of the experiences I gained from it.
yeah. And that's the main thing with anything that you do in life is always waking up and giving it one more try for one more day. Um, I know with
Mm-hmm.
my journey specifically with weight loss, it was all about just being consistent, no matter what I did. Just like how you said with doing one push up, my goal was just to go outside and just start walking. Like that was it.
Mm-hmm.
However, I got there, however far I ran, walked, it was up to me once I got there. But thinking about how far or how fast I had to go would always keep me at home. So
Mm-hmm.
just setting that goal of going outside is definitely important.
Yep.
Going outside being a metaphor, right? Like just taking that first step.
Exactly. Yep. Just get it done.
Yeah, absolutely,
Mhm.
Jeff. So yeah, do you have any last thought that you want to leave our viewers with?
No, this has been a wonderful conversation.
Yeah,
Obviously, I feel extremely grateful that you gained something out of this, and hopefully your listeners will feel the same way. But
yeah,
I I always love talking shop when it comes to figuring out where you've been, where you want to be, how your story plays a part into that, because that's the one thing that no one can ever take from you is your
yeah,
own personal journey, your own personal story. There might be a lot of Me Too companies and Me Too businesses out there as far as, well, oh, I do the same thing as them, or I can do it better. No one can do your story better than you. Okay.
yeah,
And that's what allows people to know, like, and trust you. That's what allows people to relate to you. So don't be ashamed of it. And I think for too long in my life, I was ashamed of all these fits and spurts that I had made in my life, and all the seemingly disconnected paths that I had taken. But it's led me to the point where the more conversations I have about it, the more that I actually embrace it, the more I realize that it's far from unique. There are so many people out there that can relate that I just didn't realize it at the time, because I felt like, well, how could they? How could they go through something like what I went through? But the reality is that we're never alone, and there's always
yeah,
an audience out there. There's always people that you can connect with and make an impact with if you allow yourself to be your authentic, true self, and do it without any shame.
Yeah, absolutely, Jeff. Thank you for that. Thank you for everything that you've said throughout this podcast episode. And I will drop all of your socials in the description. We'll get that sorted out then. But for everyone watching, thank you very much. Jeff, thank you for coming on. Follow
My
the
pleasure.
podcast on Spotify, subscribe to us on YouTube. You know, follow us on Instagram at excelcast underscore. Follow us on TikTok at excelcast. And as always, stay blessed and excel.